Hey guys, it's Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Okay, so this week I'm going to talk about a few things. One is, yes, I know it's a full screen. When I get to the other thing, it's kind of hard to change tabs reliably when it's not full screened. So we will full screen. Don't worry, monkeys. Um, but this is actually a bit of good feedback. I smack down commenters when they're jerks. This week, I want to express gratitude to the commenters who bothered to watch the dialogue options for last week and this week. These build slower because they're long, and we're trying to figure out a formula for dealing with that. We schedule new ones every 2 weeks just because of the processing, but we've been putting up, we tried the preview and then the full one, and then we tried part one and part two. It's still too soon to figure out what's working. Definitely, it works better to put them up in 20 to 40-minute chunks as opposed to an hour-long thing, especially when an interview goes over an hour. But we're still trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. Is it put them all up in one day? Is it spread them out over the week? I'm not sure. So please comment on what you would prefer the format be. What's easiest for you guys. Is a week too long between segments? Should they go up in small chunks on the same day? Let me know. Because the whole idea is to keep them long form. I don't want to start editing down the interviews because I'm concerned that a person may feel like their comments are taken out of context. And because this is the internet, I think it's important that we use the fact that we don't have length limits to allow people to express themselves the way they want to be expressed, and in the context with which they made the comments. I think that's super important. So, but the other thing I wanted to thank people for was the fact that the comments were very supportive. I'll scroll down on this one. This is the last video. Don't look at the timeline because it's the hit counter, because these build slow. That's the other issue with dialogue options, is they tend to rack up hits slower than other types of videos. And like there's actual dialogue going on in the comments. And I mean, Tara disclosed at one point in the interview that she's trans. So I think that, the I like her voice comment that you may have seen there was a reference to that there. But that, I know that was a concern for her going in, so being so supportive and judging the interview based on the ideas, the merit of the ideas that were thrown about, and not letting something that shouldn't matter work as a distraction the way it does so many times. Because, you can have your opinions about the whole, trans movement. A lot of people do, and there's no consensus even within the trans movement. But I think it's important to set that stuff aside when you're dealing with an individual human being. And I really thank you guys for being cool about it, because I didn't forewarn anybody. I thought that would be wrong. When you're doing stuff like this, there's something called a replacement test, a substitution test. And, Tara is a marketer. She's a trained marketer. And, so what you do is when you're trying to label someone, for comments or like a title or something like that, and you're like, all right, gamer. Would you say male gamer? No, so don't say girl gamer. And in this case, it's, would you say female marketer or, Latina marketer or whatever? No, then don't say trans marketing expert, right? You don't, because that's othering someone, that's singling it out. But there was a little bit of concern that people would go, what's going on with something or other, and be stupid. People weren't stupid. It shows it can be done. I'm starting to think I have the best commenters on YouTube, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Thank you guys for that. I know it's definitely better, the comments I got on YouTube now, than it was even 6 months ago. And it's definitely better than the comments I get on other forums where my work is discussed. So I'm very, very appreciative. Please keep it up, guys. I really do appreciate it. I know there are criticisms on some Reddits that people like to yell at me on Twitter about as well, that I can't handle criticism. That's absolutely not true. I just have no time for cruelty. And if I feel like someone is just being cruel or just trying to seem big, then I don't have any time for that, and I'm not going to listen to that, because why should somebody who isn't even a happy person have any control over my life? And I will tell them off, just because, why do I tell them off? How do I describe this? I don't think I should have to put in the extra effort to be polite when someone else is being rude. I tend to tone match. It's just something you do when you do talk radio, when you do interviews for a living. Yes, I did talk radio. You get the best response with people who are coming at you, with good intentions, when try to figure out their pattern of communication and use that to talk to them. It's really funny how that falls apart on the internet. Somebody can come at you full bore, like just ton of bricks. The media is bad. Journalists are bad. The press is bad. And then you're like, all right, fine. You're cool with generalizations. I'm going to give you some back. Whoa! Okay. Dish it out, but can't take it territory. And that's obviously a huge issue. So I'm very, very pleased with the way that the channel is shaping up. Traffic was a little low this week because of some experimentations I've been doing. Sorry, guys that really love the game content. It just doesn't have the sizzle as the issues surrounding gaming, and that, I admit, really upsets me. It's tough that, because I am a gamer, I identify as a gamer, and it really sucks that it's hard to swallow that people don't actually want to see me talking about games. They want to see me talking about issues surrounding games. That's hard, because anybody who tunes into this channel know I legitimately love video games. But, the person who can't handle criticism, I'm listening, And by the way, guys, I'm saying this, I'm repeating it as a joke. I think it's a silly criticism, because the thing about telling someone they can't handle criticism is saying someone can't handle criticism is a criticism. If you actually think a person can't handle criticism, they're not going to respond well to your criticism that they can't handle criticism. It is one of the greatest paradoxes of the modern internet to criticize someone for not being able to handle criticism. If you think a person can't handle criticism, don't watch them. Leave them alone, because they're not going to listen to you. Not being able to handle criticism, to me, it doesn't mean getting pissed off at jerks, and it doesn't mean agreeing sometimes and disagreeing sometimes, or it doesn't mean someone going, whoa, wait a minute, there's another side to that. Not being able to handle criticism is somebody that completely crumbles when they're criticized. And I've seen people like that. I've had to work with people like that. I'm not a person like that. And I think it's so weird that in this day and age, where people send me pictures of me that they've printed out and jizzed on, and I laugh it off. And, people are stupid, and people say stupid things. There's feminists, so-called feminists out there, because to me, any woman who attacks another woman, or any man who claims to be an advocate of women and attacks another woman for speaking her mind, not on the merits of her argument, but just for existing at all in opposition to some sort of lionized figure, I don't know how you can claim you're for the advancement of women when you attacks on a woman just because she's a woman and wants to talk about women's issues in a way you don't like. I don't get how you can claim you're for the advancement of women when you dismiss any woman as being just jealous or being, oh, she's a, whatever ad hominem is an easy thing to dismiss people who don't fall into lockstep with this radical sex negative feminism that seems to be taking over the discourse. I read this week, I should have got it up. Hang on, let me get it up. The New York Times thing. I didn't do a video on this this week, but I recommend, I think I'm gonna cover it. It's something called The Passion of Nicki Minaj. I'm going to cover this next week because it's not super timely. First of all, that's a hot photo. Second of all, I thought just, people like, I can't stand her music. I think that at this point, Nicki Minaj is bigger than a pop act. She has become a symbol of, I guess, what you'd call pro-business feminism or capitalist feminism. People who don't have a side of feminism with their Marxism. I think Nicki Minaj is an exceptionally important figure just because she's the most successful rap female of all time. She is I think the first woman to ever top the rap pop charts. Certainly, rap charts. Certainly the first woman to do it more than once. That is relevant. I don't care if you don't like her. That's relevant. That is merit. She succeeded. And to me, I think that's important. And of course, who's sneering at her? People like Bell Hooks, who are embraced by academia, but most people go, who? So it's different standards. I mean, if you want to be, queen of the circle jerk, and be, beloved in certain areas, but 90% of the population doesn't know what you're talking about. There's important work done in the cloisters of academia. Things like polling and actual academic research. That stuff's important. It's important that there are non-corporate research entities out there doing studies on certain things. But that doesn't make you an expert on the ever-changing world of pop culture. It doesn't mean you understand the zeitgeist. And I mean, Nicki Minaj is, to me, she's the modern Madonna. She is so good at getting the pulse and sitting on that pulse and making a ton of money off that pulse. Not necessarily by being the most popular girl in the room, but being the girl that everybody's talking about. And that, unfortunately, is a really adept understanding of our age, that you don't get ahead by being liked. But the problem is that this is tearing people up, men and women alike, but it tears up women in a unique way. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that men and women both take shit. And there's no other way to describe it. I try not to swear in these videos, but every so often it makes sense. Men and women both take shit. But the smell of that shit is different. There are differences in the things that women have to deal with that may be uniquely unfair and the things men have to deal with that are uniquely unfair. People are like, well, give me an example of men's to show I understand it. Well, men are discouraged from expressing their emotions as young as the age of 6. And that messes them up. Statistics, study. No. I'm not pulling out a study for that, guys. I try to keep these videos short. If you're actually interested on that topic, I can find the studies and pull it up another time. Every time I reference a topic off the top of my head, I am not going to pull out a corroborating study. Why? Because I'd have to give you 20. Okay? I'd have to give you 20 studies instead of one, because that's called scientific consensus. Otherwise, it can be a rogue poll. It can be some mistake in the methodology. I don't base my work on single studies. Clear? Okay, because we're going to move on to something more difficult. I wanted to sort of keep this easier off the top, because the second part I think is going to be hard for all of us. So if you don't feel like kind of getting down right now, stop listening. I won't be offended. I don't want to bring anybody down. And the reason I'm segging into this next thing is because of my ongoing coverage of the UNESCO Broadband Commission cyber violence report. And we all know the first one was a hunk of crap. I'm not sure I'll be comfortable using the term cyber violence no matter what, but I think that in this particular case, there could be a case made that it was actually an act of nonviolent violence. See how confusing this stuff gets? And the only reason they try to use buzzwords like that is try to get people to take the issue seriously. There's a divided message. There's a mixed message going on when it comes to cyber harassment right now. That there's a terminology escalation because cyberbullying people made fun of because, it's, that's something you do to kids. Adults don't get bullied. You're just supposed to be able to be tough, right? So they moved it up to cyber harassment. Well, unfortunately, everything became harassment thanks to special snowflakes thinking that people disagreeing with them was harassment. And so now there has to be a term for the actual instances of a harassment that become something that requires intervention or that might even be criminal. How do you actually, commit something that is going to cause bodily harm on the internet? And that brings us to a report that came out yesterday on the investigation into the Rehtaeh Parsons case. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. The report itself contains a disclaimer. See, now I'll full screen it. The report itself contains a disclaimer that it doesn't talk about the merits of the accusations. It uses some shorthands from time to time to talk about the victim's complaints, what Rehtaeh's state of mind was, not whether or not it can be proven in a court of law, and this is dicey for some people. But for the purposes of this report, they said we can't speak to the allegations, but they include them because Rehtaeh Parsons committed suicide after, or died by suicide, we say now, after months and months and months and months of very, very serious cyber harassment by classmates. And she changed schools and they kept going. And it was after well, this is where it gets tough because it is not in dispute that she was exceptionally drunk in the night in question. It is not in dispute that she had sex with at least one young man because there were photos that got circulated. The problem was the photos in question were apparently taken while she was puking over a balcony while a guy was having sex with her. And so it comes down to the question of consent. There's more details in this report that I did not know. And again, it's not proven in court, so this becomes dicey. And I think that it becomes very difficult to talk about. And I think that the reality is the more, the massive miscarriage of justice here was about the ongoing shaming. I think the reason I'm talking about this report in the context of the Broadband Commission is that this is an example of someone who, you notice the LLB tag. He's a lawyer. and an ex-Ontario lawyer. I think he's retired now, the guy who did this report. So, he has the expertise to actually talk about these issues. And this is all in the report. I'm doing this from memory. I read it today, and it stays with you. And so I'm going to pull through it and talk to some things that I think are relevant to the Broadband Commission. I'm not going to go into all the gory details because it's just, this case, there's something about this case in that an entire community failed this girl, even though her parents were struggling to try to get her back on her feet after a very traumatic event. And the issue of police addressing of online stuff is a serious one. There's no end in sight because I've talked about it with in other videos. There is no political will among lawmakers, none, to reopen our criminal harassment laws in this country. None. It's not an election issue. You don't hear it. The internet is an easy boogeyman. The internet is the new rap music. It's something that politicians know they're supposed to criticize because that gets you the all-important mom vote. And I'm not being glib there. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to lock up votes of women of a certain demographic because women are more likely to go out and vote and not they're more likely swing voters in this country. The older white men majority vote conservative, so all the other parties are competing for what's left. And it's important to understand these levers when you look at why politicians say the things they do, because they're trying to move stuff that will move. It's a waste of time to throw money at a brick wall, right? But two of the things I wanted to show you in this report is the way the recommendations are laid out. And no, there's no endnotes that link to a C drive or op-ed columns. But I want to show you two things about this report. And I know we're pushing up on a half hour, so I'm going to make this as quick as I can. One is how they deal with their comments on the gendering of cyber harassment or cyberbullying, as they call it. And the other is their recommendations. And I want to show this to you guys to give you a sense of what a properly done report looks like, so you can compare and contrast with that Broadband report, the original version, and see how when someone is serious about making change and improving things, how it's done. The issue with this cyberbullying, cyber violence against women, is showing it's actually a gendered problem. And I felt like the Broadband Commission report failed to be compelling in that regard. Now, this paragraph right here talks about, it says, in my view, so we just have a personal opinion here. This is an aside. But he's stating that this is his opinion. There is also a gender component that cannot be ignored in the context of certain forms of cyberbullying. And we know this is backed up by the Pew Research data, and hopefully people will do more studies and more data and track this so we can get those 20 studies that all agree. Cyberbullying in relation to girls must be differentiated from the cyberbullying that takes place in respect to boys. Now, right there, they acknowledge boys get cyberbullied too. While both can be utterly destructive, they're not downplaying the problem surrounding boys. It will surprise few that girls and women are sexualized and objectified in a way that boys and men generally aren't. Now, this is probably a guy who's recognized that there are some communities where the sexual objectification of boys happens. So he was very careful to say generally aren't. Didn't just say they aren't. Good for him. To the extent that they are treated differently, the response to sexualized forms of cyberbullying directed towards women and girls must be approached with heightened attention. Just as with sexual assaults, the sexual victimization of women and girls by way of cyberbullying is an assault upon human dignity and constitutes a denial of any concept of equality for women. And he's footnoted that. You can look it out. I'm not going to there. That assault upon human dignity is significant for a legal reason. And I like the way he laid out his case. There will be debunkers who will argue this until the cows come home, but there is a dehumanization element in the way expressing your sexuality is used as a negative against you that affects women in a stronger way than it affects men. I mean, I know men are mocked for being virgins, but a non-event doesn't result in video or photos that can dog you for the rest of your life. It's embarrassing. I get it. It's embarrassing when, say, a penis shot ends up on the internet. We saw that with Fred Durst, things like that. But does anybody think Fred Durst is less good at his job because he took a picture of his wang? No, it's not the same thing. And this is something we have to confront. And the assault upon human dignity and denial of any concept of equality is a significant, because that's a charter fight. Then that's a charter of rights and freedoms fight in this country. And there's been a lot of talk on this, and I know some people will deny this, but the consensus is that we do have issues and we do have to work on them. Why? Because these things that may not seem like such a big deal to women like me, even though I have, not gotten jobs and I have not gotten opportunities and I have been denied advancement because of slut shaming, some people don't think that's as important because I'm not homeless, I'm not starving, all that stuff. But for people with other issues, marginalized communities like our First Nations communities, that doubles up and becomes a very, very serious problem. And again, we have to understand sort of the intersection between the marginalization of First Nation communities in this country and the extra thing that comes to women in those communities. And that is not looking for special treatment for women. And that's why the denial of any concept of equality issue is important, because these things, these human rights issues, they don't get proven the way a mathematical formula gets proven. There is an element of sense and empathy going on in here. Is a woman treated like less of a person because of sexualized photographs that may exist about her? Yes. If it happens to men, the concept still holds. It just means we have to crack down on it for men and women. It doesn't negate the concept. Do we have an issue with the Puritan approach to sex between consenting, in this case, is not even an adult, but even when it is adults, I was like 27 when I took those photos. And they're not even sex. That's what kills me. They're bikini shots. And I took them because I didn't want to do straight up bikini shots. I thought they were boring. I wanted a photo that told a story. But oh no, I'm a big bad slut. And this is what teenagers are stepping into now. Too young. Too young. The internet is exposing them to these cruelties of the world. Before their personality sort of formulates. But I thought this was a great paragraph because it doesn't deny that bad things happen to men and boys. It just says there's a different component to this. And obviously, one of the places it changes, and the reason he said generally aren't, was gay youth, gay young men get some of this. They get some of the exact same shaming, which is interesting. And we see the same issues: eating disorders, low self-esteem, depression, all these things, right? But I want to move on because we are getting a bit long here. Sorry, guys, I had to deal with too much this week. Here's the recommendations. And the thing you'll notice, I'm not going to go through them all because there's 17, but I will put the link up. You'll notice the recommendations are detailed and specific. None of this SSS stuff. He's talking about special, what I like is a recommendation for a cyber crimes unit in policing. The tricky thing we have about policing in Canada is that the RCMP actually is the local police in some communities, not in I believe it's Nova Scotia this happened in, but in some places in BC it's one of them. So there is no separation between local law enforcement and national law enforcement, but that also means that the RCMP is grotesquely underfunded in this country. And I have friends in the RCMP and they're great people. But they talk about, in broad details, you can tell that there are issues and you can tell that they're not being treated like their work really matters by their government appointed superiors. And obviously we have the sexual harassment scandal as well, which doesn't help create confidence. And trust me, as someone who's gone to the police on a cyber issue, it's a you spin the wheel of suck. How bad is it gonna be? Long story short, with mine, they wouldn't proceed. They wouldn't even tell me why they wouldn't proceed. They told me that I could tell people the case was still an active investigation, closed the case without telling me, made me look like a liar in front of some people I was trying to get to agree to not let this person who was after me anywhere near the building. And it wasn't just me, it was quite a few people this person went after who were all in attendance, but they wouldn't do anything without some sort of police intervention. And so the solution was, tell them that the police had an open file. Well, then the police closed the file, and somehow the stalker found out and made me look like a liar. Didn't tell me. So when I phoned the cop yelled at me so loudly, my husband could hear it across my kitchen. I wanted them to go through. It was a female cop, for people who need to know. Has it made me less likely to go back to the police? Absolutely. I would have to be missing a limb to go back to the cops in my area at this point. Now, I understand there are other jurisdictions that are much better. The police in my area are lousy, partially because I live in a nice neighborhood, get that. But they are not equipped to deal with these cyber issues. And so I asked to speak to a supervisor. I did it. I tried to do it. When you lodge complaints with the police, people in the complaints department actually try to talk you out of it. They tell you there is a low likelihood that they will see anything wrong with the investigation, because under current laws, it doesn't matter how awful or rude or re-victimizing a police officer is, as long as there was nothing wrong with the investigation. And this happened in the Rehtaeh Parsons thing. They interviewed her twice, once with her mother present, which was against protocols. Now, there are increased protocols for youth because they're youth. If you're an adult, you're SOL right now. And like I said, there is no political will to change this. And we will keep ending up with dead kids until somebody wakes up in government and realizes we need comprehensive cyberbullying legislation that doesn't just protect girls, doesn't just protect women, protects everyone, because you need legislation that overcomes people's individual biases. And if you have a bill written for one gender, you're just not going to do that. You get someone who doesn't believe, quote unquote, like the law is a religion, as opposed to something that's supposed to be written in a way that is clear and easy to follow. Unfortunately, our criminal harassment laws in this country aren't. But, until we get something comprehensive where a young man who's being bullied can go, or a 35-year-old man who's being menaced, go to the police and get the same treatment and the same sensitivity, or lack thereof, and not get what I got when I asked to speak to this cop's sergeant, which was, I asked the cop, what do I need to do to come back to you guys? I don't want to waste your time. I will remember this as long as I live. This sergeant said to me over the phone, well, if she walked up to you in a room full of people and punched you in the face, that would be great. Now, they wouldn't say that to a woman who was trying to get protection from an abusive husband. I believe they did this because my stalker was a woman and she's still out there as far as I know. She got chased off by Gamergate, which, hey, Gamergate helped a woman by driving off another woman. Damn it. See how complicated this is? No, I'm very grateful for them for actually believing me, because Gamergate believed me when the cops wouldn't. And if you have to realize, if you need something drawn into focus, how screwed the entire system is, okay? This group of anonymous people on the internet, and you know, people are going to have what to say about the anonymity comment in this report, but all it says is it makes it easier for some people to do bad things, which is true. That doesn't mean that's the only thing anonymity is used for. But a group that has been dismissed as a hate mob showed me more respect and paid more attention to my situation and paid enough attention to go, yeah, she's really obsessed with you to a level that's unhealthy. I mean, Gamergaters were going to Wikipedia and fixing the vandalism she was committing on my Wikipedia page, calling me like a psychopath. They were fighting to stop my article from being deleted because they discovered that it was a sock puppet account that this stalker was using. Gamergate did more for me than local law enforcement did in dealing with online harassment. And that tells you how completely screwed everything involving this issue is. And that's not a slight to Gamergate. It's just the reality that, you know, obviously there's more to it than a hate mob. And if a bunch of people doing this on their spare time can see that there is a problem, why can't the police? And this is one of the things they get into with this paper is, even if it's not criminal, police and communities should work together to figure out solutions to these things that happen on the internet. And it may not be something where you can lay a charge, but that doesn't mean that has to be the end of it, right? The police are supposed to stop tragedies. Part of having laws is a deterrent to crime. That's something a lot of people don't realize. It's not just catching the bad guys and punishing them after. That's why crime rates have been falling. And that's not the only reason, obviously, but it's part of it. But, you know, we have issues and we need to re-educate our police. And we do need, I think, as this report says, let me see if I can find it. You know, here it is. More effort should be made to make both the general public and key institutions, such as the police and schools, aware of novel ways to address cyberbullying. And those of you who've seen previous videos I've done, I have taken steps to do that. The police, along with other authorities and stakeholders, such as the Department of Education, Department of Justice, representatives from the Cyberscan Unit, should develop a cyberbullying protocol that would identify in which instances to use these new alternatives. The protocol should be designed with a view to flexibility and acknowledge that various approaches can be used simultaneously. That's a great recommendation. The role of police liaison officers within schools should be clarified. You know, here we go. Given the kind of damage that cyberbullying can rapidly cause, the protocol should state that if police investigators have the requisite grounds to prevent further instances of cyberbullying or to seize images or electronic devices used to commit cyberbullying type offenses, they should consider obtaining a reconnaissance order or seizing the images or devices in a timely way. They should at all times consider interim remedies to promptly put an end to the cyberbullying. And that's what they don't do right now. They go and they talk to somebody, and, you know, what I've found is police are usually exceptionally great bullshit detectors. I know interrogators who, they are very good at spotting when someone's lying, but they have told me they'll know someone's not being honest with you. They'll know someone's scared or cagey, but they won't know about what. And the skill is getting them to talk to you. And that means not screaming at them, because then people shut down. It's not like on TV, guys. It's very different. But the skill The reason, interrogators are seen as an elite form of police officer is trying to get them to trust you enough to tell you what's going on. And right now, the way cops handle cyberbullying, I wouldn't talk to a cop about what's going on. I mean, I went to my friends in law enforcement and they're like, yeah, this is scary. Unfortunately, we can't do anything because of jurisdictional stuff, and cross-jurisdictional issues are part of this. This is a very, very good report, and I think that, okay, it's locked to a specific place and time. This other recommendation I think is interesting is police services should assess whether police-based victim services can be expanded to cover sexual assault investigations or other crime. And I know this from experience. Police-based victim services are only funded for the victim if a charge is laid. If a charge is not laid, you can use their services, but you have to pay for them out of pocket. Most people who are completely destroyed because it's serious enough to impact their life aren't working, so they're not bringing in income. How the hell are they supposed to come up with $125 a week to pay for therapy because a charge wasn't laid? This is an easy loophole to cover. And people will use it as free therapy. No, common freaking sense applies. Common sense applies. People know that, these things are not simple and it can be considered on a case-by-case basis, but these flat-out rules, no funding until a charge is laid, is garbage. Since we know that there are things that they can't lay a charge because the burden of proof is not is not high enough for a criminal charge, and it's very high. But it's at the point where it is causing distress, and there should be funding for that. Right now, we don't have it. Easy loophole to close. Prioritize investigations against young persons. Absolutely. That's common sense. Why isn't it being done? The point is, not every recommendation is going to be accepted. The point is that this is a professional document. Okay. I wanted to make people aware of it. I wanted to go through it a little bit as my ongoing thing about the Broadband Commission report, because it is important. It is important that we make sure the internet feels like it's not a question of safety. It's a question of people need to feel like the world gives a shit. That's what it comes down to. And if the internet is as destructive a place as it is for some people, they believe that the world does not give a shit. And personally, the trolls I've talked to, that's where they come from. Trolls don't believe the world gives a shit about them. And that's why, a lot of ways they behave the way they do. Because, hey, nobody cares about me. Why should I care about anybody else? And so, the internet should be a window into a better place than the stuff you're stuck with from a lottery of circumstances, not a worse place. And we can do that. That doesn't mean we can't make it better. But that creates, that requires will. That requires the spending of political capital. That requires adjustments from all of us. I had to adjust the way I did things because of what happened to me. But do I feel like the internet as a whole is a safe place to express my opinions? Yes. My issue is with a handful of people that wish me ill, not the general internet. And I can make that distinction, right? So this is the beginning of a solution as opposed to the Broadband Commission report, which I believe was a continuation of the problem. And part of the problem is we get hung up on this issue of gender. It's too easy a straw man for extremists on both sides to attack. And I think that we have to recognize that there are different challenges for men and women. We have to look at both of them. Our Kids Help Phone, our youth counseling hotline, just announced a service specifically for young men, for boys to call in, because they have found it's harder for young men. Men are not socially trained to express their feelings as freely as women. Now, this doesn't mean women express our feelings authentically. Oh no, books and books and books have been written on this issue, but we do talk about them. And that's more than men are doing. And so there are different and unique challenges for dealing with each side of the gender equation, or all sides of the gender equation. There's no reason we can't have a functional understanding in all of them. and that's what I believe is part of feminism. This is the next wave, let's call it the nth wave because it sounds good. Forget first, second, third, nth. Let's make something future proof. This is nth wave feminism, and for those of you who get this reference, good for you. You're as big a geek as I am. But we need stuff that continues, and we need stuff that isn't restricted by time and place and social status. And we need to recognize that, like the report said, things need to be flexible. And we can't just look at, looking at one facet of the problem for a particular report that looks at one facet of the problem is great. We need to do that. But then we need to step back and look at it in the bigger picture, and this idea that men should be sidelined in discussions of gender are narrow-minded thinking. Now, that doesn't mean that when women say, look, this is what it's like to be a woman from my perspective, this is my reality, that, people who can't identify with being a woman should be a little hesitant to jump and criticize that. But on the other hand, men, because there's a lot of discussions about, the quote is that, my wife and daughter would rather I die on my white horse than seem vulnerable or weak. That's legitimate too. That's something we need to listen to, because that is, that whole thing of how patriarchy hurts men, or how, toxic masculinity, all those buzzwords that people don't like hearing. But our current social structure, our rigid definitions of gender do hurt everyone in some ways. A guy who wants to stay home with his kids is mocked. Guys are being put on a daddy track because they want work-life balance and want their kids to actually know their father, and a lot of times they didn't know theirs. And the fact that this, to me, shows good judgment, but it's being punished at corporations, well, that's going to impact productivity. That's going to mean you're less likely to keep that employee because he's going to find somewhere where he is going to see his kids, because this obviously is important to him. It's going to affect innovation, because very smart people have to choose between family and work. And guess what? The very smart people go, family's more important. So this whole straw man of gender is getting in everybody's way. And that makes issues like the Rehtaeh Parsons case harder to deal with. That makes, the inclusion of transgender people, or trans people, as we're supposed to call them now, difficult. Why do we care? If someone feels more like a man or a woman, why the hell do we? This seems like such a non-thing to care about. Like, who cares? Does it affect you? Maybe, some people would get a little weird with dating somebody with that, but that's something different. And obviously, it's the whole thing. I've got a lesbian friend who says, I don't do dick. Okay, that is her boundary, and that is fine, but that is a completely different issue than getting a job, being able to get and obtain employment because you are not, the perfect symbol of femininity because, hey, you had to transition because what your brain says you are and what your body says you are weren't the same thing. Why do we care? The fact that we have seen the pictures of segregation with, and I'm going to use the word even though you're not supposed to because that's what they called them, the colored drinking fountains or the colored restrooms, they were for black people. The fact that we see that and continue to do that to other people and make excuses for that stuff because it's about gender and not about race. That's insane. That's absolutely insane, and it's getting in the way of saving lives. Do we care if the name is Rehtaeh Parsons or Jordan Manners? No, we don't. They're both teenagers that died too soon by preventable causes, right? And that's what we need to focus on, and we need to keep talking about this, and we need to keep pushing this, and we need to ignore the noise, and we need to focus, and we need to find things that work. And that, at the end of the day, is why I do what I do, because, hey, I wasn't, I didn't go to Bishop Strawn private school in Toronto, which is where all the, thinkers of tomorrow are our stream through. You know, my nephew has opportunities being raised the way he did that I didn't have. I didn't have access to those corridors to power just because of money. And so I'm doing what I can. But I'm not sitting here complaining that I didn't have access to those corridors to power. I'm using a populist approach and I am being heard. And I have to understand how those corridors work to sidestep them. But I don't sit here going, well, it's impossible, I give up. That's not what this is supposed to do. So hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully you found sort of my little pep talk at the end, what it was intended to be, which is just sort of passionate, not, lecturing. It's not intended as a lecture, guys. You're entitled to your own opinions. But I'm going to wrap now because this has gone on for an hour. Sorry, really long Feedback Friday, but it was one of those weeks and I was sick for 2 days. But I'm going to wrap now. Happy Friday. Enjoy. You have the whole weekend to watch this. So watch it. If you're listening to this, you have watched it.